There is a note at the very end of a TikTok caption that most people scrolled right past. The post was a tearful video. The girl in it was 16 years old, and she was asking strangers online to send prayers for healing. The caption was a paragraph of grief, the kind of grief that makes you stop mid-scroll and feel something. But at the very bottom, beneath all of it, she had typed 6 words that she apparently reconsidered almost immediately. I should delete later. She never did. And those 6 words would end up meaning everything. Welcome back. What I am about to walk you through is one of the most psychologically layered cases I have covered in a long time, not because of the crime itself, though the crime is horrifying, but because of everything that happened after it. The 5 months of social media activity, the manipulation of true crime creators, the eulogy that behavioral experts say sounded like a script, and the 2-word ending to that eulogy that nobody has been able to fully explain to this day. We are going to Carrollton, Georgia, population around 30,000, an hour southwest of Atlanta, the kind of town where people know each other, where church communities overlap with school communities, and where a double murder in a family home in February 2025 hit like something nobody was remotely prepared for. The victims were Kristen Brock, 41 years old, and her husband James Brock, 45. They were shot to death in their bed while they slept. They were found by their 5-year-old daughter. The person charged with killing them is Kristen's own daughter from a previous relationship, a teenager named Sarah Grace Patrick. This is that case. Part 1: The family. Kristen and James Brock were, by most community accounts, deeply embedded in Carrollton life. They were active members of their church, known in the area, and were raising what is described as a blended family of 7 children together. James had previously survived serious heart surgery and was living with the help of an LVAD left ventricular assist device, an implanted mechanical pump that keeps blood circulating in patients with severely weakened hearts. It meant he was medically fragile, reliant on the machine, and not exactly a physical threat to anyone around him. According to James's family, the couple did not own a gun. Sarah Grace Patrick, born in 2008, was Kristen's daughter from her first marriage to a man named Donielle Patrick. She was 16 at the time of the murders. She would turn 17 while the case was under investigation. By all outward appearances, she was a normal teenager, church-going, socially active, well-liked by most of the people around her. She had no documented history of violence, no prior criminal record, and no known diagnosed mental health conditions serious enough to require hospitalization or medication, according to her own grandfather. She had also, notably, graduated high school early at 16 and had been recognized by her church youth ministry as a difference maker. That detail will sit uncomfortably with you later, but there were cracks beneath the surface, as there always are when you look closely enough. Court filings from 2018 show that Donielle Patrick, Sarah's biological father, had alleged prescription drug abuse by Kristen, going as far as seeking supervised visitation over concerns about the home environment. Those allegations were never proven. More recently, in 2022, a domestic dispute between Kristen and James led to a temporary protective order filed by James after Kristen allegedly drove a car into a barn while he was inside. James later requested the order be dismissed. The couple married in December 2023, just 14 months before they were killed. James Brock had also apparently expressed private concerns about his stepdaughter that nobody in the family fully took seriously. According to one of James's relatives, he had said on multiple occasions that Sarah was not who she presented herself to be, that the sweet church-going girl people saw publicly was not the full picture. Kristen, by this account, would brush it off, attributing it to the general friction of raising a teenage girl in the social media era. James apparently was not convinced. He would turn out to be right, but nobody listened in time. Part 2, February 20th, 2025. It was a Thursday night in February when everything ended. According to the timeline established by Carroll County investigators, Kristen and James Brock went to bed at their home on Tyus Road on the evening of February 19th. Neither of them would wake up. On the morning of February 20th, 2025, the couple's 5-year-old daughter walked into the master bedroom expecting to wake her parents for the day. What she found instead was a scene no child should ever be asked to process. She ran from the room in distress and eventually reached her teenage half-sister Sarah, who then called 911. Carroll County Sheriff's deputies arrived to find Kristen and James Brock shot to death in their bed, still in their pajamas. The initial scene told a clean, controlled story. No broken windows, no forced entry at the doors, no sign of a struggle that would suggest a violent intruder had come and gone. No items were missing from the home, which ruled out robbery as a motive almost immediately. There was also the question of sound. Sarah told investigators she had been awake late that night, watching television until around midnight. She said she had heard the faint alarm of James's laved heart machine going off at some point before she went to bed, but no gunshots. In a subsequent social media exchange, she clarified that she heard the machine around 10 to 20 minutes before sleeping, but described it as faint due to background noise. Law enforcement specialists and behavioral experts who reviewed the case publicly noted the same problem with that account. The house was described by investigators as a small single-family home in a rural area with no significant ambient traffic noise. The claim of not hearing gunshots in that environment drew serious skepticism. What was not in dispute was this: Sarah Grace Patrick was the one who made the 911 call, not a neighbor, not a passerby. The teenager who slept through the shooting was the one who reported it. And then the investigation began quietly, methodically, and with all eyes on the person who had already started building a very specific version of the story online. Part 3: The Digital Trail. Within days of her mother and stepfather's deaths, Sarah Grace Patrick was on TikTok. To be clear, grief takes many forms, and people process trauma differently. Young people especially tend to reach for their phones and their social platforms as a reflex. What investigators and behavioral analysts found notable was not the fact that she posted. It was how she posted, and what she posted, and the specific choices she made in every caption and every frame. The videos were tearful, emotionally pitched. One was posted on March 18th, less than a month after the murders, captioned with a request for prayers for healing and a break from everything. Her follower count grew, the comment section filled with condolences. People said they could not imagine the pain she was going through. She also posted a Mother's Day tribute to Christine, calling her her best friend. She wrote about feeling unable to cope. She shared a retrospective video featuring images of her parents, with a caption reflecting that a year earlier, she had no idea they would soon be gone. The framing was cinematic. The timing was precise. The engagement was significant. Then there was the caption at the end of the March 18th video: "I should delete later," 6 words that prosecutors would later argue revealed a level of self-awareness about the performance that undercut the sincerity of the grief it was embedded in. She never deleted it. But here is where it tips from unusual into something more difficult to explain away. In June 2025, 4 months after the murders, while she was still publicly performing the role of devastated daughter Sarah Grace, Patrick began reaching out to true crime content creators on TikTok directly by private message. One of those creators, who runs the account reportedly with nearly 120,000 followers, later shared screenshots of those messages publicly. The messages asked her to cover the Brock case. When the creator asked for context, the person identifying themselves as Sarah replied that Kristen and James Brock were her parents, and that someone had come into the house on a random Thursday night in February and left them there for her and her 5-year-old sister to find. Then came this line, which the creator read aloud on her platform: "News coverage of this case would be a really big hit." She was not asking for justice. She was pitching a story. A second TikTok creator, a family friend of the Brocks named Kelly Brown, also came forward to say that Sarah had contacted her directly, asking her to speak publicly on Sarah's behalf about the night of the murders, to support Sarah's version of events. The creator, reportedly, later said on camera that she found the whole exchange deeply unsettling, specifically the part where Sarah seemed to be inserting herself into the investigation from both directions at once. Simultaneously, the grieving daughter and the anonymous tipster directing attention toward a case she allegedly created. At one point, in the comments section of a true crime video speculating about who might have had inside knowledge of the Brock home, a commenter wrote, "Most definitely was, since they knew the house." Investigators Investigators later identified that comment as coming from Sarah Grace Patrick's account. She was apparently describing herself. Part 4, the eulogy. Among all of the behavioral evidence gathered in the months following the murders, investigators and analysts paid particular attention to one specific public moment: Sarah's eulogy at her parents' funeral. She stood at the front of the church in front of family, community members, law enforcement, everyone who had gathered to grieve Kristen and James Brock, and delivered a composed, structured speech. Behavioral analyst Scott Roos, who has trained with the FBI and US military intelligence, reviewed the footage and described the eulogy as strikingly rehearsed. He noted the absence of the physiological markers of genuine acute grief, the irregular breathing, the involuntary pauses.
I just wanted to say goodbye to my mama and Jamie since we never got the chance to. I was so used to you guys always being here to the point that I never once thought to imagine y'all not being here. I didn't have a single clue how much I needed y'all until now. For James, thank you for all the life lessons you taught me and for being the best bonus dad ever. Your heart will finally be healed in heaven and neither of y'all will be in any pain anymore. Although that gives me so much comfort, your fight was not supposed to end there. Although there's nothing we can do to bring them back, we still have control over how we treat people with us today. Therefore, when someone tries to tell you anything, no matter how important it could be, just listen, because you never know when it's somebody's time to go. You can say goodnight and wake up a few hours just to find out they aren't there, despite their joy and their love. So just listen and never take a hug or anyone or anything for granted and live with all that you have in you like they did.
The loss of muscular control around the voice. None of it was present. The tone stayed level. The phrasing stayed clean. Roos also flagged specific language choices as unusual for the context. One line in particular stood out not just to analysts, but eventually to investigators as well. We still have control over how we treat people. At a funeral for two people who were shot to death in their sleep by an unknown intruder, or so the public narrative went at that point. The word control landed oddly. It did not connect to the circumstance. It did not console the bereaved. It moralized in a direction that had nothing to do with what the crowd understood to have happened. Carroll County's Director of Communications, Ashley Halsey, addressed that specific line publicly when asked. She described it as something that raised her eyebrows. She acknowledged that Sarah may simply have been expressing emotion about the fragility of life, but she did not dismiss the alternative reading, which was that a word like control, in that specific setting, said by the person investigators were already watching closely, carried a weight that was hard to ignore. Then came the final two words of the eulogy: "I'm sorry." She did not explain it. She did not contextualize it. She said it, and she stepped back from the podium. Halsey addressed this publicly as well, noting that Sarah may have been apologizing for showing emotion during the speech, which would be a fairly conventional thing to say. But she also acknowledged that it could mean something else entirely, something deeper, something that nobody in that church that day had enough information to interpret yet. The investigation at that point was already well underway. Part 5: The arrest. For 5 months, Carroll County investigators working alongside the FBI and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation built their case quietly. They said very little publicly. They confirmed no details about physical evidence. They did not confirm whether a weapon had been located. They gave no information about a specific motive. What they did say, consistently, was that the evidence was substantial. Sheriff's Office spokesperson Ashley Halsey used the phrase, "mountains of evidence," when describing what had led investigators to focus on Sarah, specifically pointing to her digital footprint. On July 8, 2025, after learning that a warrant had been issued for her arrest, Sarah Grace Patrick turned herself in. Her biological father, Doniel Patrick, drove her to the sheriff's office. She was 17 years old. She was charged as an adult with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault. 2 additional charges, 2 counts of malice murder, along with 2 weapons charges were later added as the case developed. Under Georgia law, a conviction on malice murder carries a mandatory life sentence, even for a defendant who was 17 at the time of the offense and is being tried as an adult. At the bond hearing held on August 19, 2025, Judge Dustin Hightower heard 2 hours of testimony from both supporters and opponents of Sarah being released. Her pastor described her as a committed member of the church community who had chosen to be baptized and continued attending services even after her arrest, calling him from jail to pray. Friends and church associates wore "I Stand with Sarah" shirts and described her as kind, patient, and incapable of harming anyone. On the other side of the courtroom, James Brock's adult son, Tristan Brock, told the judge that attending the hearing felt like living inside a nightmare. Other members of the Brock family testified that Sarah had continued to contact them for months after the murders, calling and texting to say she was sorry for their loss, that she missed James, that she wanted to help, and that those expressions of sympathy, in retrospect, felt like part of the same performance. Judge Hightower denied bond. He cited 3 specific concerns: the risk that Sarah could flee, the risk that she could intimidate witnesses, and the overall danger to the community, given the severity of the charges. He also made clear, in a line that has been quoted widely since, that the proceedings before him were not entertainment. Sarah Grace Patrick has been held in Carroll County Jail since her arrest, kept in a section separate from adult inmates due to her age. Her trial was initially scheduled for January 2026. It has since been delayed until August 2026. Her defense team sought a change of venue, citing the level of pretrial publicity the case had generated, including coverage on Court TV, which her attorneys specifically named. That request was denied. Part 6, What We Still Don't Know. This case has a mountain of questions underneath the mountain of evidence. The gun has never been publicly confirmed as recovered. We do not know the specific nature of the digital evidence investigators say links Sarah to the murders. We do not know whether there was a second person involved. Investigators have said explicitly that other suspects have not been ruled out, and that interviews are ongoing. We also do not have a confirmed, publicly stated motive. There has been speculation, some of it from Sarah's own grandfather, Dennis Nolan, who has been one of her most vocal defenders. In one interview, he raised the possibility that James Brock's alleged past. Nolan described him as a former convicted felon with possible motorcycle gang connections, could mean that he had enemies from long before Sarah was in the picture. Investigators have not confirmed or denied whether that line of inquiry has been explored. What Nolan could not offer, when pressed by reporters, was any alternative suspect or any concrete reason to believe Sarah was innocent beyond fact that she was his granddaughter, and he could not imagine her doing something like this. That is an understandable human response. It is not, unfortunately, a legal argument. Part 7, The Larger Question. There is a thread running through this case that is worth sitting with for a moment, even before a verdict has been reached, and even with the important caveat that Sarah Grace Patrick is innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. The thread is this: what happens when social media, true crime culture, and alleged criminal behavior all start to loop back into each other? If the prosecution's theory of the case is correct, then what allegedly happened here was not just a murder. It was an attempt to control the story of a murder in real time, using the same tools and platforms and attention-seeking behaviors that are completely normalized for an entire generation. The TikTok tributes, the direct messages to influencers, the engagement with comment sections speculating about the killer, all of it, if the charges are accurate, was a calculated performance running parallel to a police investigation. Digital analyst Dr. Todd Grand, who reviewed the case publicly, raised the broader societal question: is there a new category of crime emerging, driven not by conventional motives like money or revenge, but by the desire for attention itself, the desire to be seen, to be the center of a story, to be interesting? It is not a comfortable question, and it is worth being careful about, because framing any crime primarily as a social media story risks flattening what actually happened, which is that 2 real people, Kristen and James Brock, were shot to death in their own bed. The 5-year-old who found them will carry that mourning for the rest of her life. That is the center of this story, not the TikToks, not the follower count, not the behavioral analysis of the eulogy. 2 people are dead, a family is shattered, and a trial is coming. Sarah Grace Patrick's trial is currently scheduled for August 2026 in Carroll County, Georgia. She remains in custody, held without bond, charged as an adult, with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of malice murder, among other charges. The prosecution says their case is built on a mountain of digital and physical evidence. The defense says their client is innocent and intends to fight. Whatever the verdict turns out to be, this case has already forced a genuine reckoning with questions that are only going to become more relevant as time goes on about how grief is performed online, about what investigators can read into digital behavior, and about how much weight a few words at the end of a eulogy can carry when the right people are paying attention. "I'm sorry," she said, and stepped back from the podium. We still do not know what she meant. I will update this case as the trial proceeds. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.